Yeah, that's interesting. It's very intriguing, this motion, because it's been put under seal. The party's been told not to share it. We'll see what happens with that one. Kelly Craft, thank you. Kelly will be covering the trial for us, and we'll hear from her throughout the day here on Court TV as we ramp up to coverage next week.
All right, and joining us now to discuss this, National Trial Attorney Michael Jaafar is here with us. Michael, it's good to see you. Let's talk about that motion to intervene and delay. I know we don't know what the details are, but if you have an attorney who's not one of the parties in the case coming in to try and intervene, what does that sometimes mean, and could it impact things in terms of how things are moving in the courtroom?
It's going to be very inflammatory. I'm really curious to see why an outside party wants to intervene in the case, to delay the case. Usually this happens whenever there's some sort of a civil trial on the side. There's no civil trial in this case that I'm aware of, but maybe there might be one that might be filed. There's a ton of parties, by the way, that are affected. Whenever two kids are murdered, they have collateral relatives, direct relatives. So I'm kind of curious to find out what that's about, but it's obviously going to delay things. The jury isn't going to be privy to it, but it's going to be all over the internet. And the juries, as we know now, they're on the internet. They say they're not, but they are, and they understand what's happening. So this can only serve to help one side or the other, depending on what we're going to see in this motion.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe it's a motion to upgrade the camera quality in that courtroom. Some frustrated person is like, I can't watch this thing. It's driving me nuts. So when we look at this case, you heard Kelly saying the strategy is a little different in terms of the witnesses that we've seen in order. They didn't, they started with Kay Woodcock last time with Lori's case. But it's pretty much the same set of facts. It's just, it's going to be nuanced. What is different, though, is John Pryor. The defense attorney is very aggressive, and he is putting on a much different defense. You felt it in the opening statements. From a prosecution standpoint, Michael, would you do much different? I mean, you've got the facts. You got Lori, the max. I don't see a reason to change the playbook much.
No. So this is going to be, in my opinion, a completely different case, right? There's a massive barrier between this defendant and the other defendant. As we expected, his defense attorney began sowing the seeds of throwing her completely under the bus. They're going to steamroll Lori Daybell, right? At the end of the day, when these kids died, right, if you're Lori Daybell in the eyes of the jury, if Chad Daybell is the worst version of what the prosecution says he is, if he's the worst version of that, well, you have an easy decision. You get up and walk away and don't kill your own kids, right? But so what they're going to say is, how would my client, how would this defendant have ever prompted a mother to conspire with her brother to murder her children, right? It didn't happen. It's a fantasy, right? So I think this case, although they will put on a very similar prosecution, this is a completely different case, right? Completely set. Just that one switch, that it's the stepfather, the husband who's not their father. To me, that makes a world of a difference. And I'm also, for the defense attorney, I don't like the aggressive approach with the subject matter at hand. I always like a softer approach. Even a female defense attorney, they're way more impactful with these juries, especially when children are involved. So I'm watching that closely. He's doing a good job, but he might be a little bit too aggressive, in my opinion, with his opening statement.
Well, now, speaking of approach, Chad Daybell, we're hearing from our team that's there inside of the courtroom about how he's reacting. It's much different than we saw and heard about in terms of the reaction of Lori Daybell. Kelly Craft reported that he was shaking during the testimony, and in case some of our viewers missed that testimony of Detective Hermosillo on the stand, let's listen back where he's talking about the discovery of those remains in Chad Daybell's backyard.
I recognized him to be the same little boy laying on that table as J.J. Vallow. He had the same hairstyle, shorter on the sides, longer on top. At that point, I recognized him as J.J.
Once the clothing was removed, what did you observe happened next?
Dr. Warren pointed out some bruising on his arms, on his ankles, on his chest. He also pointed out some scratch marks on the left side of his neck, just under the duct tape. At that point, Dr. Warren and his team performed the autopsy. And once we started getting down a little bit more in Tylee's burial site, we assumed it was Tylee, we observed part of a human skull underneath the bucket. There was some teeth that we ended up excavating from underneath. At that point, the goal was to lift that out of the ground. And so there was we made kind of a little hole around it.
Michael Jaafar, we know the jury was reacting to that testimony, but talk about the impact that it could have. Maybe not as much even on the guilt phase, but it could have on the penalty phase with Chad Daybell reacting in a physical way to that testimony.
I have a strong opinion on this, Julia, and here's what it is. In the lead up to this case, we seen bloggers and vloggers who were analyzing the case be interviewed outside the courthouse, even by our own Matt Johnson, where they were saying, look, Chad Daybell never reacts. Even when his attorney speaks to him, he doesn't even move his head and look and acknowledge his attorney. He just moves his eyes, and he keeps he's very, very, very stoic. So I'm going to give this as a credit to his attorney. His attorney would have grabbed him by the lapels ahead of the case and said, you listen to me and listen to me good. I'll do my job to get you off because I truly believe in your case, but you need to do your part. Your part is more important than my part. When emotional evidence is admitted, I do not want you to do this whole stoic thing. You're not a doomsday prophet today. Under my guidance, you're a defendant fighting for your life. We know the evidence that's going to be admitted. We know the playbook. We've seen the case ahead of this case, and we saw how that ended. It ended with her going to jail for the rest of her life. Do you want to spend the rest of your life in jail? No. If you don't do that, you have to listen to me, okay? And you listen to me by reacting when the evidence comes in. The jury wants to relate to you. They want to see that you're relatable. They won't see you as relatable if you don't react. So that's my theory behind that, because you don't shift from being stoic to being overly reactive unless you have been, advised.
Possibility, definitely a possibility.
Yeah, already we're seeing a big difference between Lori and Chad in that Lori, you got the feeling when she was sitting there was like, it's okay, all this doesn't matter because Chad and I are gonna be, ruling the world afterwards. Where Chad's like, oh, that dumb doomsday stuff was a big mistake. He seems more grounded in reality.
More ready to do what needs to be done in terms of even letting his attorney throw Lori Daybell under the bus, which she did not let her attorney do, is the report that we got.
Yeah, Lori's watching this from her cell. What? Let's get a break. All right, there it is, that news conference today in Milwaukee. And, the last question was, this is got to be very difficult for those involved in this identification of these body parts being found around the county.
Right.
And I'm glad they clarified that there's no indication that there are multiple victims. It's just the timing of positively IDing all of the body parts.
ID'd one part and not another.
Yeah, the leg and the rest is still pending, but there's no indication that there's other victims here. Michael Jaafar, there does seem to be enough, obviously, to charge this individual. They met at his workplace. It doesn't sound like they worked together. Not quite, we're not sure where he worked, but this was a first date turned fatal, according to the criminal complaint. Your thoughts here on what's next here? He's got a lawyer. What's next for both sides?
Ace, because whenever police make the move that they make now, and we were just analyzing this last week on another case, whenever you see police make the moves that they're making now, they're pretty certain, right? That doesn't mean it's a guarantee that you're going to get convicted, but it does mean that it does guarantee you that they're confident in their case for them to make the move, right? right? And so this person basically now, we're going to start seeing the evidence come out. The investigation is still ongoing, right? And so we really don't know the extent of the evidence, but they feel pretty confident to charge him. Obviously, right? Double jeopardy would apply if you charge somebody, you go to a trial, and they get acquitted, right? I mean, then at that point, you know, if evidence comes out later on, then they've already been acquitted, it's done, right? So they seem pretty confident. So the next steps are us basically just seeing it lay out there, and then they proceed with the charges.
This is such a difficult case, and I know a lot of women watching this are going to be reacting and having a lot of questions about how they met. I know they mentioned the workplace, but the criminal complaint says that she was excited about this first date with someone new, and there's the images, the surveillance video of her sitting at the bar with him, that they're laughing, things seem to be going good. How did things turn to this? But I think that possible date turned fatal element of this, Michael Jaafar, will be just an added thing that would be really hard for a jury to overlook if this case goes there.
We're in an era now where you could date anybody at any time and meet people online anywhere, right? And then you meet people. And so the overwhelming majority of those encounters do not end up in charred, dismembered remains laying around your community. They don't end that way. We all find out about the cases like this, which have a chilling effect on everybody else in society. And so everybody, you see this beautiful girl, right, and the pictures of her, right? This is going to resonate, and this is going to be the thing that, you know, would taint a jury pool. This person either did it or didn't do it. Those are the only two options. He's either guilty or he either did it or he didn't do it. We're all going to be looking at the evidence to see, not only because we want justice in this case, but because we all have, you know, daughters and we were sisters, who meet people online, and you don't want to imagine stuff like this happens. Again, it happens in the infinitesimal percentage of these encounters, but it happens, and it's a reminder that it happens. So we're going to be looking at this case closely for personal reasons and business reasons.
Absolutely.
It is. These are the ones that just shock you to the core. Things that happen in life, and every now and then something comes up, and you're like, "Whoa!" It makes you think. Coming up, we're going to get a break here. It is something else. Michael Jaafar still with us. The confessions of Richard Allen are huge, and these allegations or these reasons to throw them out are disgusting, but compelling on, I guess, some levels. What's your overall thought here? I mean, the defense is basically saying this guy was tortured to the point where he lost his mind and said and confessed to people in this prison facility. What should happen here?
They should throw this out. Plain and simple. They should throw this confession out. I was involved in a case with a kid who confessed to a crime who he clearly didn't do, right? He's one of thousands upon thousands of people that confess to crimes that later on evidence shows they clearly did not do. In the instance I'm giving you, a kid confessed to a murder, and then the actual murderer came out, and this kid was 13 when he confessed to holding a semi-automatic weapon, and then the actual murderer came out and said it was me, right? When DNA evidence began getting introduced, people who had signed confessions were exonerated because the DNA showed that it wasn't them that committed the crimes. This man clearly was not. He was not a normal human being when he made this confession. He was not in a situation that he should have been in, with the isolation, being in prison. I don't know why a judge would not throw this out. If your case stands on its own ground and your case has merits, you don't need a confession that was gotten in these instances in this way. This is a big, big, big problem, right? We have too much of a tendency to throw people away for millions of years when they're not exactly having their best moment, right? So I think this judge should throw this confession out. Plain and simple. You have a case, follow your case, build your case, proceed with your case, prosecute your case. But this is not a person, if half of this stuff is true, half, this confession should be thrown out.
His attorneys have been all over this. They have made allegation upon allegation about not only what was happening inside the prison, but they have alleged that there are links to these organizations, these racist organizations in the area, and say that many people who are officials are involved. But Michael Jaafar, I want to see if you think that there's a possibility that the judge if this alleged confession comes in for the jury, does the defense then get to bring in all of this about the prison, all of this about the guards and the way that they say he was improperly watched and surveilled and not given food? Does that come in for this jury?
It has to come in. The epitome of injustice would be to admit this confession, but to exclude and not allow them to present that evidence. Because if that happens, and I don't think there's a judge that would make that mistake, but if that happens, essentially you're condemning this person to a conviction where there's evidence, compelling evidence that shows that he might be not guilty, right? So that judge would have to. I mean, this has appealable error, United States Supreme Court appealable error written all over it if the confession is admitted, but the surrounding evidence around the confession is excluded. That would be, in my opinion, a big miscarriage of justice.
Another thing that does raise eyebrows is the confession that he gave doesn't line up with the facts. He apparently said he molested both victims. They were not, according to the facts, and also that he shot them with a gun in the back. Also not true. So it does make you think a bit, but we'll see. Let's get a break here. Let's bring in Michael Jaafar. This is a case that got all of our attention, and we didn't know how it was going to go. The jury did come back guilty, and you heard that juror talk about the reasons why. You know, it's pretty obvious from that perspective of why. What about sentencing here? 18 months, they're asking for probation. Down the middle, what would you argue if you're the defense, and what do you actually think the judge is going to do here?
I think the judge is going to sentence her to some few months in prison. She has to, right? She was clearly negligent, right? That's why when these charges came down, I wasn't surprised, because at the end of the day, right, she wasn't being, nor is Alec Baldwin being charged with premeditated murder, right, and with life without parole. They're being charged with what they should have been charged with, right, which is being negligent. They clearly were negligent. Think about it. Ipso facto, they were negligent. Someone died with a live round when she was the person entrusted to make sure there were no live rounds. Her argument is, well, Alec Baldwin, it's not in the script to point the gun. It doesn't matter, right? We're talking about your negligence, right? He didn't point the gun. He could have pointed it at something else. You can't have live rounds. It's your responsibility. So I think her defense are going to argue, her defense in the sentencing are going to say, you know, hey, listen, we respect what the jury has decided, but at the end of the day, she's got a clean record. She's never done anything, you know, like this before. She had no intention to hurt anybody. But the judge is going to have to sentence her to some months because of another factor, which is making sure this never happens again with anybody else ever again, right? A lot of these cases all come down to, you know, having a chilling effect on future bad conduct, which is the positive byproduct of these sentences, right? So the judge is going to have to sentence her to something. I think 9 months. That's what I think.
Oh, wait, now you went up from a couple of months, which I thought 3 months would be pretty low, but 9 months, that's half of that 18 months, which is the max in this case. But that could be significant for her life and for moving forward. She's already had her life put on hold for this trial.
Yeah, it's a young person. She'll be fine in the end of the day. But to Michael's point, sending a message, something went wrong there. Michael Jaafar, enjoy your weekend, sir. Thank you, as always, for your time and expertise. We'll